What does it mean to be English? And what is the deciding factor for someone to be English? Let's talk about it. It's a very simple question that you would think that has a simple answer. But if you ask 10 different people, you could get 10 different answers. And that's exactly what I found going through the comments of my previous video. Now, what I noticed in the comments section to that video is that some people, like myself, simple definition of English is your nationality, the place you were born and raised. For others, there was an ethnicity argument about the heritage and your culture and the traditions and the historical lineage that is of the English people. Some people make a racial argument, effectively saying that English is synonymous with being white. You can't be English unless you're white. And some other people have made it a more cultural thing about being well versed in the customs and the heritage and the culture of what it means to be English. What it made me realize is that disagreements come from our use of using the word differently. We are not having the same conversation around the same point. So let's look at some of these different kind of terms that people use to define what it means to be English. Now, obviously the most simplest explanation is nationality, the place you are born. Now, in this situation, I'm not merely talking about the fact that you have a British passport, because there are many pathways to establishing a British passport that doesn't involve you being born in this country. We are purely talking about people who are born and raised in this country. Now, one of the comments that I remember seeing in the comment section went something like this. And basically what it's saying is, if a dog was born in a stable, it doesn't make it a horse. But this doesn't make sense. Comparing a stable and a nation are two different things. Just because you were born somewhere doesn't change the actual species that you are. What this person is effectively trying to say is that just because you're born somewhere, it doesn't make you of that place. You could be born somewhere, but not of somewhere, right? Meaning that you could be born in this country and know nothing of its culture. So I understand that there is that side of the argument, and if someone wants to make that argument, sure, there is nuance to this discussion. But just for the basic overarching point that, you know, if you're born somewhere and raised somewhere, you live somewhere, you're educated there, I do not see how that does not make someone English. We had comments like this. So, and there were other comments in the comments that were more leaning towards ethnicity. So comments like you see right now on the screen, these were making the point that you can't be English unless you are ethnically English. In other words, English is an ethnicity. And when you look at the definition of English, it does say that English is an ethnicity and a nationality. So these people who refer to English as an ethnicity and see English through that lens, they are not necessarily wrong, but they are looking at half of the story. I learned a lot from people in this camp, because there's many people who gave great insight into the history, the cultural and the heritage of the White Angles and the Celts and the Nordics, and even the Germanic background of English. So even the concept of being pure English is a bit of a misnomer when you take in that historical context. People of this land in history and what they fought for and how they controlled the land, you know, this is what made England England. These were the people that gave birth to England, and so therefore they are what it means to be English. You know, there are things like your past doesn't determine your future. The person who you were yesterday isn't necessarily the person you're going to be tomorrow. And so the past, whilst is a very important thing and we learn a lot from the past isn't a determinant. It doesn't determine, it lets us know where we have been and where we have come from, but it doesn't necessarily answer who we are in the here and now. It can do, and I appreciate for some people it does, but by in and of itself it doesn't. It's a context, it's a historical context, but that's another one that people think. For some people, where you come from and the origins of how these things came to be, if it didn't start there, then there would be no here. So for them, the reason why we're talking about England today is because of these ancestors who made it possible for England to even exist in the first place. There is some credence to that. What I would say to that is that I don't believe, and certainly for myself, that people who are non-white, who are born and raised in England, I don't think any of these people would claim to be ethnically English. I don't think that's the argument here. I think what they're saying is, I am just as English as you in the context that I was born on this land, I have lived on this land, I have raised family, I've paid tax, I've done everything that you have done on this land. The only difference between you and me is a biological one, a genetic one. That's when this argument for me is like, okay, you can make that argument, especially if someone is claiming to be genetically the same as you, but they're not. People look at their family history and their family structure. There have been generations of people in their family, of English people, and these things have been passed down through the generations. And so there is a lineage, a family lineage that tells them that their blood is truly English. But then they also would disregard, let's say someone was born in the Caribbean, someone was born in India or Pakistani or Australia. These people would say that despite the fact that you were born and raised here, the fact that your family is from those places in the world, that you just can't possibly be that because your family is not that. And so if your family is not that, then how can you be that? But many people break family traditions and lineage. The only thing that makes them family effectively is their genetic code. Of course, someone who was born in a long line of English men and women, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, sisters, great grandparents and the forth, I can totally understand why that person would feel very English and feel like there is a difference between their background and historical context and somebody who's been here or whose family's been here a fraction of the time. Yeah, when you're comparing those two. But it's another lens to look at it, your heritage. So can you become English, right? We understand that culture shapes people. It shapes all of us, right? And no matter what environment we're in, our work culture can shape who we are. Our family culture shapes who we are. Our environment in terms of the neighborhood that we live in, all these kind of things can shape us who we are. And so therefore, when we look at it through a cultural lens and say, well, can someone become English then, even if they weren't born English? Because we have to recognize that culture is part of shaping someone's identity. And even the people who would say that, English is an ethnicity, there is a culture that shapes that too. And so in the case that I gave in the video, where can you be someone who is non-white or non-English? So in other words, you weren't born here. You could be Jamaican, Australian, Indian, African, whatever. But can you become English? They've been here 30, 40 years. They speak the English language fluently, probably even better than many people who live in this country and who were born here. Has an English accent. They support England, whether it's a football, the cricket, or any other sport. They understand the humor. They share the customs. Are they any less English than the person who doesn't have that, but has the other things that we've discussed? Again, different people answer differently depending on the lens they're looking for, and so it's important to understand the lens that we look through in order to understand the reality we're describing. Now, these aren't just semantic points, because depending on which one you lean towards, this affects your experience of how you integrate, how you assimilate, how you belong. And so that's why these distinctions are important. when we are trying to understand these things. And if we think about this as a national discussion, it's important that we have a shared term of reference to understand the point that we're talking about. And the disagreements largely come not because of any malice, but because we're debating and discussing the same word, but we have a different meaning to what that word means. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know how you define English.